you could just confirm that you can hear me okay, that would be appreciated. I think he's maybe gone on mute. So I have approximately, well, exactly. Okay, thank you. That's wonderful. I have 19 slides. So the first thing to say is thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. This is specifically about the Tubex Collection and Recycling Programme, which we've been running in the UK for the past 3 to 4 years. And this seminar is courtesy of Green Tech. So thank you, Green Tech, for giving us the opportunity to talk this morning. So my next slide just is a brief contents of what I'd like to talk about today. So again, it will be a little bit of revision, which is the first couple of slides, just to remind people of why do we use tree shelters in the first place and what are the actual benefits. I'm then going to talk briefly about sustainable tree protection. Obviously, the topic of this seminar is about the collection and recycling scheme. So again, I will focus predominantly on the Tubex recyclable range of shelters. I will briefly mention the biodegradable range of shelters and the reasons why that might be appropriate in certain situations. As I said, I'll then move back and focus heavily on the Tubex Collection and Recycling Programme. A little bit of an overall summary of how things have gone over the past 3 years. I'll then talk through the number of hubs and those hubs which Green Tech sponsor and support, how to use the programme, both in terms of returning tree shelters or supporting the shelter collection programme in respect to becoming a partner, and then a little bit of practical advice on how to go about removing the shelters, and then there should be the opportunity for any questions. So the first thing to say is, unfortunately, we can't make this that interactive. But what we can say is if you have any burning questions, please do feel free to pop them in the chat, and then we'll pick them up at the end of this presentation. So, as I said, I have 18 slides. We're already on slide 2. That gives me 16 more, 1 minute a slide, about 16 minutes. So, why do we use tree shelters? Well, tree shelters were invented back in the 1970s, late 1970s, and there was a gentleman called Tully. So some people who are a little bit longer in the tooth, even than me, may be familiar with the term a Tully tree shelter. And they were developed in the late 1970s, early 80s, and then slowly different products were found to perform better than others, and Tubex tree shelters have been manufactured for well over 30 years in the current form. Why do we use a tree shelter? Well, the first thing to mention is there is a huge increase in the survivability of newly planted trees. So the first thing to mention is that they do reduce the amount of stock that you have to plant due to those increased survival rates. And one of the principal benefits is this microclimate that they create. So a little bit like putting a young tree inside a small greenhouse. So the most significant factor is that they do hold a lot of that moisture. So particularly in very hot weather, that can actually help hold the amount of moisture within the Tubex shelter itself. And they provide a protective environment in cold weather as well. So we've certainly done a lot of testing over the years, and we have some interesting results which show when you use a twin wall insulated shelters such as these, that actually stops getting frozen conditions within the tube itself. So there's lots of benefits in terms of the microclimate which a tube creates. And certainly within the UK, as everybody probably knows who's on this call, we do have a significant problem with predominantly deer, lots of different types of deer in the UK. We don't have any real natural predators anymore. The wolves and the bears have long since been hunted to extinction. So consequently, when we look to plant new trees, it's basically a wonderful buffet lunch for a whole plethora of different browsing animals. So from the very large red deer as shown there, right down to the small voles. So different heights have been shown to be best, and it really is quite obvious as is shown on that picture. A typical and the most popular size is a 1.2 standard shelter, as it's indicating there for roe deer, and what up to 1.8 is usually considered to be appropriate where your predominant browsing problem is red deer. Obviously, single protection on trees is not the only solution. And for very large areas, you often see deer fencing, but certainly that can itself be problematic if people leave the gates open. So certainly there are substantial benefits in using single tree protection, and generally speaking, the height of those shelters is matched with whatever the most significant browsing pressure can be on a particular planting site. So a little bit really on Tubex sustainability strategy. Historically, as I say, the Tubex tree shelters have been developed and have been supplied and manufactured for many decades now. And we are very much committed to a sustainable strategy. So we have a wide portfolio of different tree shelters available, different sizes, different diameters, and the selection of those really is tailored to what the pressing needs are of that particular site, what the type of planting is, how accessible it is. But what we have always wanted to do is to always aim to transition to, as it says there, a circular economy. So the recyclable shelters, which we'll go on to talk about in a minute, is maximizing the recycled content. But we also have our range of biodegradable products, which are appropriate for those hard to reach sites and ones where practically removal and recycling may be problematic or difficult or challenging. So the overriding statement we would make is, in terms of a tree shelter protection, it's the right solution in the right place. Different sites have different pressures, different requirements. They may be very inaccessible, or they may be incredibly accessible. You may have a very well managed site with extremely good access. And so the selection of the type of shelter very much depends on a number of factors. So our overriding principles are ensuring that you specify, when you do specify your tree shelters, you look at what is both practical, sensible, and also most cost effective. So we do have a range of recyclable tree shelters and also the biodegradable tree shelters. Key principles is, and always the most important thing has to be, that we want to ensure that whatever solution is adopted works. So it does protect the tree for as long as is required and then can be removed at end of life, or if removal simply isn't possible, to look at something that can be naturally biodegrading in situ. So just a couple of notes really. So Tubex Nature has been developed and manufactured for coming up to 4 years now. First launched about 3 years ago, and we began to scale up more substantially over the past couple of years. One thing that is quite challenging is to find something that is naturally sourced, so biosourced, fully 100% biodegradable, but also can last for a considerable period of time in often extremely exposed, challenging external conditions. So we are on a journey, I would say. Certainly we haven't reached the point where we have a product that ticks every single box there. At the moment, based on our experience of service life, we have a service life of 3 to 5 years where we are reasonably confident that this product will perform for the requirement, but obviously the target is 5+ years. Fully biodegradable, and we can have that fitted with either standard or biodegradable zip ties. The products themselves have reinforcing rods to help with that pull out. A couple of sets of holes at the top for refixing for the 1.2 standards, and when you combine that with a timber stake, not treated, the whole system is 100% soil biodegradable. Now, approximately 90% of the tree shelters we manufacture are recyclable, and as I said, since 2023, the recycling scheme has been going from strength to strength. The first thing to mention that this has taken a considerable amount of work, which I can't really claim any. I can't claim to have done an awful lot prior to that time, and there's been a lot of work with many different partners to ensure that the collection recycling scheme is successful. So the first thing to mention is a big shout out really is to the Yorkshire Dales Millennium Trust, who've been a pioneer with us and in the early days, and still continue to work very closely with us in terms of running those free to use collection and recycling hubs. So thank you to them, and also our distribution partners. So Green Tech have 2 hubs, which I'll show you details of and location in a second. And again, without the input of lots of these partners, the scheme, scheme doesn't work so effectively. We are always looking for more partners to help join the scheme, but in principle, it's a free to use collection and recycling program, and there is a legacy now of plastic tree shelters in woodlands that does now need to be removed. And certainly when they reach their end of their life, where they've done their job, the trees are away, they're not under risk of significant browsing pressure, that's when they need to be removed, recycled, and brought back into the scheme. So at the moment, there are 2 main methods for doing that. I'll show you a map in a second, and certainly I would encourage you to go and have a look at the Tubex website, which has a detailed map showing where our free to drop off hubs are. So I'll talk a little bit about how we practically go about doing that. But the first thing is have a look on the website, decide which is your closest free hub, and those can be dropped off in dumpy bags. So the first thing that often people ask is, do we have to use one of yours? No, we do supply 1 ton dumpy bags that you might see the aggregate sand and gravels being delivered in. Nothing particularly special, but those bags need to be filled effectively as possible. We want to try and minimize the amount of movement. So we try and certainly ask that you fill those bags as effectively as possible when you've removed the shelters. Again, try and nest those shelters as much as possible. And we tend to find that you can fit somewhere in the region of 350 to 400 1.2 shelters per bag. Once those bags are filled up, they can be dropped off at the free to use hubs. So we have a number of hubs throughout the country, and then we will arrange collections of those in larger volumes. So I've jumped onto my slide. What I was going to ask, the first question is, how many tree shelters since 2017 do you think, 2021, do you think we've actually had returned back into the scheme? So I'm sure everybody did actually see that, so I might as well jump on. It doesn't work as well as a PowerPoint presentation, this one. So the number is approximately 1 million. In fact, it's a little bit over 1 million if we were to convert those to 1.2 standard shelters. So in terms of all of the partners that we have in collection hubs, so that's a quick map, and there's a more interactive map on the Tubex website, which basically shows you if you want to return some tree shelters, you can look at the map, look at your nearest hub, click on that and book in a drop-off. So that is essentially free to use. GreenTech have 2 hubs. So we have our main GreenTech HQ near Borough Bridge, as it shows there. And then GreenTech also have another one over in Londonderry in Northern Ireland. We have in the order of 26 at the moment. We do have a few that are still coming online. I think I would also say we are interested in hearing from partners who would also want to join as a free to drop off hub. You'll probably notice on that map there is a little bit of area with not very much coverage, certainly in the south middle part of England, and to a lesser degree parts of Ireland. And we do have more hubs coming online in Scotland, but again, we're always looking for more partners to help us join the scheme. So the first thing to mention is if you are looking at this and think, actually, there's nowhere close enough, the second option we can offer is a doorstep collection. Now, at the moment, we do charge £39 a bag for a minimum of 6. If you have a significantly larger number for, say, a specific project, then we can have a discussion with us about setting you up as a temporary hub and making that collection in conjunction with others. So please don't think just because there isn't a local hub that we can't get those shelters back off you and back into the scheme. So what are the major benefits of the scheme? Well, I won't go into great detail about exactly what we do, but in principle, once the shelters have been manufactured, they've gone out, they've protected the trees, say for potentially 5+ years, they've been removed, placed in the bags, dropped off our free hubs. We then arrange for those to be collected. Those shelters then go back to a final sort. I'll talk about the detail in a second of what we can accept and what we can't. We tried to make it as simple as possible, but the general rule of thumb is we take back polypropylene. So any shelter, be it Tubex or any others, high density polyethylene, which tends to be the mesh products. What we can't accept back is PVC or any biodegradable products. Once we've had those returned, we do a final sort to make sure that we've got the nylon ties removed and separated out the different types of plastics. Then we send them off to be washed, shredded, and reformed back into polypropylene granules. Those then come back to the Tubex factory and are then made back into tree shelters, essentially closing the loop. So in those situations where, as I say, you may not have a free to drop off hub, this is an option, and we say we ask for a minimum of 6 bags in these instances, these doorstep collections. But if you have a substantially larger number, I'd say in the excess of 10,000 shelters, please do give us a shout, and we may be able to make an exception in those situations to set you up as a temporary hub. So how do you either join the program or look to arrange a drop-off? Simply go on the Tubex website and you can then go through the process identifying your closest hub to drop off, or if you are interested in setting up as a hub, then that also, there's an application form on the site there. So practically, how to remove a tree shelter. Theoretically, it's very, very simple, but as in the same with all things in life, you need to have the right tools to do the job. So the first thing to mention is pull safety knives are the most appropriate for removing a tree shelter. We've done lots of trials over the years, and we've certainly found that these are the best, quickest, and most effective tools. So this is one that you can pick up from Screwfix. It's called a Stanley pull tool. These are made by Martor. We actually supply a number of these to our hubs that they can then give away to some of their people who are interested in returning shelters. You simply place these tools at the bottom. They very easily come up through the shelter. You can then remove it. What we do ask, as is indicated on that photograph, once you've got 4, preferably 5, you reform them back into a nest, and then they're placed in the dumpy bags. Now, a little tip on filling the dumpy bags: if you have particularly 1.2 meter high shelters, turn the dumpy bags on their side, stake them open, and then fill them horizontally to start with. Then when you've got the bag completely filled, you can then tip it upright, and then that makes it very nice and efficient. Get as many as you can in there. I say we would aim to say 350 to 400 1.2 shelters in the dumpy bag. We do ask if the cable ties are removed, and please also remove the stake, remove organic materials. We don't really want trees coming back to us. We really do just want the shelters. And they should then be, say, nice and nested, tightly packed as we possibly can. It makes everything more efficient, and we do, reduces the amount of transportation we need to do. So a little bit of note on what we can accept back. We have tried to make this as accessible as possible. We do acknowledge that there are different shelters out in the woodlands that do need to be removed. So all polypropylene, just to repeat that. So all Tubex standard recyclable range are made from polypropylene. We accept competitor products also made from polypropylene and high density polyethylene, so HDPE. Predominantly that's netting products. We can't accept PVC. It contaminates the plastic. Sometimes people have a belief that all plastics are the same. That really isn't the case. It's a bit like mixing water and oil together. So polypropylene, HDPE, we do have to separate those before they go away to be recycled, but PVC is problematic. So appreciate there are a lot of spiral products out there made from PVC. We can't accept those back, but there are other recycling systems in place for PVC products. Just a note really on biodegradable products, there are a wide range of biodegradable products such as Tubex Nature, and again we would ask that those are not returned. They shouldn't be returned. The idea of biodegradable products is that they stay in situ and they biodegrade, but they are problematic for us. They will cause contamination, so we can't accept any biodegradable products to be returned. So I think I'm about done. So I'm unsure if you could jump on, Richard, because I'm not looking at the chat. If anybody has any specific questions you would like to ask about the collection recycling scheme, please go ahead.
Thank you, Pete. That was very, very informative, and it's good to see how the recycling programme has been such a success since 2021, and to have recycled over 1 million shelters is it shows a lot. All the hard work is definitely paying off, and hopefully we'll see much more of that in the future. We have got a couple of questions, which I'll start with. Caitlin, we're interested in setting up our own scheme. We have, so I don't know if this is a new hub or actually their own scheme. We're interested in setting up their own scheme. We have a site where we could store, collect guards, but we would set up a scheme. Additionally, what is the admin and licensing involved?
Okay, that's a good question. So thank you. That's wonderful to hear. I think from a practical perspective, it's important that we have hard standing areas and accessibility for Arctic trucks. We have, in certain situations, have hubs where the access isn't so good and we've had to do rigids, but it doesn't make the collection cost as efficient. So I think the first thing to mention, it does need to have good access. So things to look out for is, obviously, it needs to have a reasonable road surface that can support an HGV. Have a look out for things like overhead power lines. So practical things, really, to make sure you can get an Arctic in, get it loaded and get it removed. Now, the dumpy bags with shelters in them can be moved around by hand, but that is potentially a little bit of a risk, and it's better if you can use mechanical equipment. So something with forks on, and obviously you can lift them and move them around. We can provide articulated vehicles, standard trailers, curtain-sided vehicles with we can ask for them to have a tail lift on the back, which makes it a little bit easier to get dumpy bags in and loaded up. So first thing is hard standing areas, I would say. I think based on previous experience, try and have them so they're not too visible from the road. Just from a practical perspective, you don't want to have any risk of encouraging fly tipping. So if you can, keep them away from general public view. In terms of the size, the area for storage, probably think about what we need to get on a lorry is about 40 filled bags. So think about the size of a trailer, a standard Arctic trailer. That would be about the size that you need. It would be probably, from a housekeeping perspective, better to have a bit of Harris fencing around that area so you can keep it neat and tidy. It doesn't need to be inside. It can certainly be outside. So I think the first to say, if anybody's interested in setting up as a hub, there's an application form on the Tubex website. So just click on that button. There's a short survey form which it sort of goes through most of those questions I've just asked. Please send us a photograph of the area you're proposing. Are there any hazards? Have you got good HGV access? And then from a day-to-day management perspective, once you've got that area set up, you do need to have some physical presence on site. People can't or shouldn't just turn up. We discourage people from simply just arriving. You have to pre-book. And again, you do that through the Tubex website. So you just simply click on the nearest hub. And in that instance, if you were set up, yours would pop up as a Tubex Collection Recycling hub. And then again, there'll be a series of questions. How many bags have you got? And then what time do you want to drop them off? And then you arrange, or that person dropping off the shelters would arrange directly with the hub to do that. That's through email. In terms of the legal requirements, it is changing a little bit, but the general approach is that we think it's good practice to have a paperwork trail, because you are dealing with waste, although it's relatively low risk waste. So you do need to have a waste transfer note completed. Again, we've tried to make that as simple as possible by pre-populating one. So there's literally a few boxes in that waste transfer note where you state where it's come from, how many bags. We've already populated on that form what it is. And then when you drop them off, you hand that note over to the receiving hub. So there is a requirement to register as a waste transfer station, for want of a better word. Again, at the moment, that's free, but you just have to request an exemption from the Environment Agency. Again, it's through a government website. You simply put your details in, and then they will give you an exemption number. So all of the hubs do that. Some of this legislation relating to waste just change. What I've just described was that we decided was the simplest way to do it, that we just say, we'll ask everybody to do this. There is a little bit of a grey area where the shelters can come from. You maybe don't need to do it, but we think it's better just to ask everybody to fill in a waste transfer note, and that ensures that it's consistent and there's no ambiguity. So that process actually isn't very complicated. So those waste transfer notes, the templates we send out, and then you can just pass them on to people. And that just means that really you just have a bit of record keeping. When you have sufficient bags of shelters, which, as I say, usually we aim for 40 plus that we can get on and make a collection efficient, we will then arrange through our collection scheme coordinator to make that collection, and we'll again then have a new waste transfer note. So that's just the administration paperwork trail that's required for legal compliance. But I hope I've not made it sound too complicated, because it isn't. It's actually quite simple. Sorry, that's quite a long answer to a simple question.
Very detailed answer, but well answered. Thank you. Caitlin's also asked about the PVC recycling program, but what I would say to that, Caitlin, is to I've just done it myself while I've been sat listening to Pete. That if you just put spiral recycling programs into Google, you can find the schemes which come straight to the top of the search. But there's other schemes out there with a similar pricing matrix, so it's quite easy.
The one thing I would say is that we do know that some, in terms of plastic waste is relatively quite simple to recycle, and we know that there are other companies out there who specialize in dealing with waste and waste products. The thing to mention that historically a lot of plastic material that gets, inverted commas, recycled gets downcycled, so it gets made into poorer quality products that can't necessarily then be recycled again at the end of their life. So, for example, a lot of materials go into things like bin bags, wheelie bins, plastic trays for decorating, black plank pots that you see in garden centres. But those then are more difficult to recycle at the end of their life. What is very different about our scheme is that we are not downcycling. So that waste material comes back and is then obviously, so it's washed, it's reprocessed, it comes back to Tubex, and it makes more tree shelters. So we maintain it in a closed loop, so it doesn't get downcycled. So that's probably the one thing to be mindful of. Even if you're sending off to a recycler, that may be getting downcycled to a product that then won't be able to be recycled for a second time.
Hopefully that answers the question. But yeah, there's other schemes out there. But hopefully, what we're seeing with these schemes, it's all about using the right products and then doing the right thing with the materials after it's done its job. I think that's about it for questions by the looks of it, Pete. So unless anyone's got any more to add, we might wrap the webinar up, and we'll let everyone go get some lunch. So I'll probably end the webinar now, but a massive thank you for everyone for joining us today. A big thank you to Pete and the team for putting the presentation together, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.